So I got into martial arts. I had just finished high school. I was playing basketball. I basically played basketball my entire childhood into high school. And then I just was never particularly that good at basketball. So there was no shot that I was going to play college ball. And I was looking for something to stay in shape. This is going to get into like some funny like Tampa history, but this is when actually the first Grace Tampa was in a Caltas on like Bears Avenue, like way back when. That was like Rob Kahn's first gym, and I was actually boxing in that Caltas. So I started boxing just as a way to stay in shape. Then around that time, I was like really watching UFC for the first time, becoming like a UFC fan. And I saw Anderson Silva, and I saw that he was using Muay Thai and clinching Chris Lieben and kneeing him right in the head. And I was like, this is amazing. This guy's incredible. I want to do whatever he's doing. And that brought me to Muay Thai, and I started training Griffin Raw with Dan Rollins. I was probably 19 when I started training, and then 19, 20 is when I had my first fight. Yeah, once I started doing Muay Thai, I really just like, that was it. That was pretty much all I wanted to do, all I was thinking about. I was like living that. And so I ended up fighting really early on, maybe 6, 8 months into training Muay Thai. I'd already like boxed for a little bit. I probably boxed for like 4 or 5 months and then did Muay Thai, so I had a little bit of background. But yeah, once I got into Muay Thai and kickboxing, that really took over, and I just took to it really fast. Back in those days in Tampa, there was like a pretty decent amateur scene going on. Well, when I first started, there really wasn't, so I was like competing a lot in like Jacksonville and Daytona. For whatever reason, there were a lot of amateur fights going on down there. I don't really know what correlation that had to do with anything. Maybe like some big MMA gyms were down there at the time, I'm not really sure. And there was a few like pro shows going on at the time. And I did pretty well as an amateur kickboxer. I won a state title as an amateur at like 147 pounds, which is crazy to think about me at that weight. And yeah, and then I did some boxing as an amateur and some MMA as an amateur. And you know, right around that time, there wasn't a whole lot of amateur shows that were like available and ready to compete on. And I was kind of like ready to turn pro at that time. So that's like basically when I turned pro. Was I got that state title. I had kind of moved in and out of Florida for a little bit. Then when I moved back, I trained for a little bit, took an MMA fight, and then basically turned pro. I wish I had spent more time fighting as an amateur, particularly in MMA, but I was just kind of like over it and really eager to turn pro. Yeah, that first pro show was at the RFC. It was like actually a really devastating fight for me. I trained really hard for this. There was like a lot of build-up, put a lot of pressure on myself, like at all times in general. And for this fight in particular, I put a lot of pressure on myself. It's your pro debut. There's just like a lot of pressure in that moment in general. And went out there, basically walked the guy down all the way to the fence, threw a flying knee. He ended up like kind of ducking under the flying knee, taking me down in like a crazy kind of midair scramble. And as I posted out on the ground, my elbow dislocated, my arm broke. And then nobody really saw it. He mounted me, he was like punching me, my arms were like flailing all over the place. So that was my pro debut. So yeah, that sucked. Yeah, that set me back a good amount. You know, I had to deal with that injury. It was my first time being injured. It was my pro debut. Now I'm 0-1. It was like, you know, I think more so psychologically and like, you know, just my spirit was like really hurt. The physical, it was like just a normal dislocation. Didn't really like fracture anything. So I was probably in a cast for like maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and then starting to get some of that like full range back in my left arm. I mean, I had to put a lot of pressure on myself. That's never the way that you want to start a fight. Didn't even feel like I had much of a fight. It was like literally the first exchange of the fight. So yeah, I was very dejected, like pretty depressed, but I've always been pretty like headstrong and determined to do this. So, you know, as soon as I could, I got back in the gym and was training. I kind of had a 2-2 record by the time that I moved to California for a little bit, and that's where I met Dwayne and trained a team Alpha Male for a bit. And then I came back and had like a 2-fight winning streak, so I was like 4-2 at some point and was feeling good. But throughout my whole career, I just never really had much guidance, never really had like a head coach who I felt like, you know, was in as committed as I was committed to it. Had some people that really were helpful along the way, but I never felt like I had that one head coach to really like guide me in the right direction. Never really had a manager. So a lot of like the misfalls in my pro career were due to that, just like mismanaged opportunities, like the wrong fights at the wrong time, the wrong matchups. So yeah, just doing things like that. And so I moved out to California in 2014, and I was living in Oakland, and I didn't really know where I wanted to train because there's a lot of good gyms in that vicinity. There's like the Rat Pack, which is in San Francisco. There was AKA, which is in San Jose. There was Combat Sports Academy, which is in Dublin, California. And then Team Alpha Male was in Sacramento, and that was actually the furthest gym from me. So I just wanted to make sure that I was going to do my due diligence and train at them all and see what I like best. And I ended up, once I got to Team Alpha Male and I saw the way that Dwayne was running practices and the culture there, this was like the first time that I showed up to an MMA team practice and it felt like an NFL team practice, an NBA team practice. It was so well organized, well structured. The energy was so good. Everybody was so positive. Everybody was on the same page that I was kind of hooked up and I signed up immediately. And I would drive 90 minutes there, 90 minutes back, like 4 times a week. So, you can imagine at this stage as a coach, I really don't want to hear anybody's shit about like commuting or anything like that. I was just commuting 3 hours a day to train somewhere. That's how much I believed in it. And then I was moving from California back to Tampa right around the same time that he was kind of having that falling out with Team Alpha Male, and he was moving back to Denver from California. And I just decided that I wanted to start my own Bang Muay Thai affiliate, and I wanted to get affiliated with him. And so we started taking steps in that direction. Being around Dwayne and TJ at that time, right, from that era of, let's say, 2014, he's getting ready to fight Henan Barao basically for the first time, to, 2000 and maybe 19 is that title reign, maybe 20, I'm not really exactly sure on the dates. But just to watch those two together training and to see Dwayne's level of like just mastermind, organization, understanding of martial arts, understanding of positioning, of kickboxing, of MMA striking was just so incredible to be around. I'd never really been around anything like that at that level. And it was really eye-opening to see two people who were both at the pinnacle and peak of their athletic career, and in this case, coaching career, like come together in that way. It's been by far the most influential and like momentum shifting change of my career as a fighter and as a coach. Yeah, I didn't really train too much under Dwayne. What I would do is I was still training and teaching in Tampa because at that point I had started my Bang Muay Thai Academy. And so I had a few more MMA fights where I would like go out to Denver a little bit. At that point in time, this is when like Team Elevation had like a really good structure over there at the Muscle Farm Academy. So I'd go over there, do some training, train with Dwayne, and then come back to Tampa where I did the majority of my camps. And the results were like the same. I was on a bit of a skid. I could just never really put it together. Whenever you get on a skid as a fighter, now like your confidence is starting to like wane on you a little bit. And I was definitely feeling some of that. And just felt like overall like a lot of disorganization in my camp. And like I said, just didn't have that one head coach who was like in it as much as I was in it. And that was always really difficult. So yeah, tail end of my MMA career was not good. And then I started transitioning over once Glory started coming to the States is when I got hooked up with Glory and started kickboxing. I just got really lucky just to be at the academy when Glory was planning on coming to Denver. It was actually their first show in the States, and I was able to get on that card and get a 3-fight deal with Glory. And that was amazing, just that whole experience, seeing the highest level of kickboxing, being able to be on the same cards as some of these absolute legends was like really incredible. And just the growth that I experienced as an athlete, fighter, and now eventually as a coach, I can take a lot of that stuff that I learned from that time. And it's the same kind of like skid that I was on in my MMA career really followed me into that kickboxing career, where just some of the structure just wasn't quite there with having the head coach, being able to get the pad work that I needed, being able to get the direction that I needed wasn't really there. So that was difficult, and again, still dealing with like a lot of like the just lack of confidence there towards the end. Yeah, I was still on that skid. Fought in Denver, fought in New York, which is really cool to go back to my hometown and fight in New York, but just wasn't able to get the results. Finally, they came back to Orlando. I jumped on that card and lost a really close decision, but I was really happy with that performance. So it was good for me to kind of have my last kickboxing fight be like a performance that I was happy with and felt like some things came together for me in a nice way. To be honest, like I feel like if I didn't have the rough patch that I had towards the tail end of my pro career, that I wouldn't have that same drive and like passion and competitive edge that I still have right now as a coach, because I still feel like I'm not quite done with the sport. I have more to prove. Like I felt like I didn't really show all I had as a fighter, and now I kind of have that opportunity to make up some of that ground as a coach. So I think at the time, obviously it was very devastating, but now I feel like it was kind of a blessing in disguise. The transition from me being a fighter to a coach was very like gray and like 50-50, because I had open Bang Muay Thai while I was still fighting that whole time. Basically, I was at Gracie Pack while I was still fighting that whole time, teaching Bang Muay Thai there. So it really wasn't until I had decided that I wasn't gonna fight anymore and I was like good and I was ready to move on with my life, that's when I was ready to like full-time commit to opening my own school, opening my own gym, created Kaizen. And yeah, that was, 3.5 years ago where I really just made that full transition into coaching. So we opened right at basically the start of the pandemic. We were lucky enough, first of all, we were lucky enough to be in Florida. I think my business probably would have failed anywhere else. I was really lucky to be here. I was lucky that we were able to just kind of fly under the radar and didn't have a lot of signs up, a lot of signage up. Nobody really knew that too much was going on. The city of Tampa, for whatever reason, didn't really bother us too much. And I basically just told and this was like the time where Zoom was getting really popular, and I was just so turned off by the idea and concept of Zoom that I was so against doing anything on Zoom. I just felt like it was a real juxtaposition for us to tell people how important martial arts is, how important it is for their lives, how important training is for their lives, and then to just be like, but you can do it at home on Zoom. It's like, oh, wait a second. Like, weren't we talking about how important community is? Weren't we talking about how important it is to be somewhere and get like a really actual workout that you can't really get at home? And now we're just gonna let all this kind of fly by the wayside because we don't really know what's going on in this moment. So I was committed to teaching. That's basically what I told my students is like, hey, if you want to cancel or pause, I totally understand, weird times, but I'll be here teaching classes if you guys want to still show. And I would say probably 80% of the people still showed, and I was teaching classes pretty good. Yeah, I always felt like watching the MMA scene in Tampa, that I could do things differently and better. And probably right around 2016, 2017, I ended up going to Austin and training at Onnit and covering some classes. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Onnit, at that time, it was like they were combining the highest level of strength and conditioning with some really high level martial arts all in one space that was really beautifully created, well designed. The staff was like the highest level. They were just doing things, in my opinion, like at the highest level in the right way. And that was really inspiring for me to feel that. And so that's basically what I wanted to bring back to Tampa, and that's why I felt like I can do things a bit differently here. And that was really like the motivation and inspiration around developing and starting Kaizen. It feels good that things are moving along now, and we're getting to a good little patch here where I feel like, the gym's probably not gonna blow up if I go away for a couple of days. Nothing's gonna be set on fire. I have a great staff around me. Brandon Waters has been really incredible, just being my right-hand man throughout everything. Got a really good business partner right now, Will, who's doing like the business side of things. We got some really great grappling coaches with Alon, Mahmoud, and Colton. So I just feel like we're in a really good spot right now. And and it was just a lot of like learning on the job. Even though I had the internet and Instagram and YouTube where I could like pull some inspiration, some ideas from, at the end of the day, you're always gonna have to learn on your own by doing things. We actually started out as like a yoga school as well as an MMA school, and that quickly like either was like lack of execution or just I was too far ahead of my time on that curve. Like people just weren't really ready for that, or we just poorly executed the game plan. It's really hard to say as far as that goes. So that was kind of learning. And it's learning your community. It's like understanding that like it's no longer really what you want. It is what you want, but you have to be aware of what your community wants and what's important to them. And you want to create a culture where they feel included on the direction where this thing is going, and that they're excited to be included on the direction of where this thing is going. And so that's where I think we've done a really great job. Just like, every time we've added something, they've been excited about it. Obviously, we're in a brand new, beautiful facility that's like state of the art, and right up there with some of the biggest gyms in Tampa, and we feel really good about that, especially, we've only been doing this 3 years and we're competing with people who have been doing it for 15, 20 years, so that feels good. Yeah, I mean, I still have that inspiration of On It in the back of my mind. That's still like the overall overarching goal, is to have a place where strength and conditioning and MMA are commingling at the highest level with the highest level athletes and highest level coaching. And so that's kind of the goal. And we're here in about just a little over 4,500 square feet. We're going to be moving into the other side of this building, and that'll be closer to over 8,000 square feet. We're going to be putting a cage in. We're going to be maximizing the strength and conditioning area. So it's, again, just like, a constant evolution of what we're trying to do here, where we're trying to go, the culture that we're trying to create. Obviously, as a coach personally, I'm trying to build some world champions. What's a facility where I feel like a world champion can be built in? What does that look like? Do we have strength and conditioning there? Do we have high-level grappling coaches, high-level striking coaches? What does the overall feel and look of the place look like? People who are going to be, reaching a high level, reaching the highest level of the sport. Like, what kind of environment do they want to walk into? So that's where we're going. That's where I'm headed as a coach, is creating some world champions. And where we're headed as a gym is just, again, creating a great culture where everybody feels welcome and can train. If you're someone who's never trained before, there's a class here where you can participate in and feel welcomed and feel like you're learning at your pace. And if you're the highest level combat sports athlete, we got classes for you and coaching for you as well.